Welcome to the Business Spotlight podcast. My name is Kay Cote, and I'm your host here on the show today. And today I have Dustin Knoche, president and founder of LK Transport, as my guest. We're going to be learning about his business, his journey to business ownership, best practices that he's learned along the way, as well as challenges that he may have faced to give you an inside look to what it's like to own and operate a business. If this is your first time on our channel, be sure to like and subscribe to get notified when we drop episodes like this. Welcome, Dustin. It's so great to meet you. Thanks for being on the show.
Great. Good to meet you as well. Glad to be here. Appreciate the opportunity to talk to you.
Of course. Well, before we dive into all things business, I'd love to share with my audience a little bit about you. Feel free to share a bit about yourself.
Yeah. Former Army guy, spent 7 years there, married, have one 9-year-old, and we're actually currently out of town on a little getaway and just enjoying some family time as much as you can when you've got a lot going on in the business world.
Definitely. Well, that is so cool to hear that you have family, you're having some family time. Thanks for taking the time to chat with me during your family time as well. So yeah, let's dive in. Okay, so I'd love to learn about where the journey began for you. Was there an aha moment? You knew you wanted to start a company, or how did it all happen?
Yeah, so when I got out of the military, I got into transportation, and through that journey, I ended up in corporate America, and I realized in corporate America that the way things move is a little bit more challenging, especially when you really analyze and try to do some positive work. There's a lot of restrictions within that. The other thing I learned is within the transportation sector, it can be commoditized a bit, and I didn't believe in that. So through that obligation with that company, I said there's better opportunity out there to create something that's a little bit more conducive to family life and that work-life balance than working for somebody else. So we went out and bought 2 trucks 10 years ago, and what was kind of fun was we tried to have kids for a while, and the day we took all of our money and bought all of our trucks was the day that we found out that we were pregnant, and we said, well, this is going to be some added stress, but it'll drive you to a certain degree. So we bought a couple trucks and continue to finagle and grow what we're doing.
Wow, well, that is an incredible start to your journey, especially boom, there is you guys are having a kid and it's all kind of like all happened at once, but 10 years later and you're doing well, it seems like.
Yeah, it's been a stressful 10. I think the first 5 are the most stressful. We couldn't fully immerse into the business. I had to keep a job and keep working through it because banks don't really like trucking necessarily. Um, so those first 5 years were rough because you're working a 60-hour job, and then you're getting up at 3 in the morning to run a business and go until 10 o'clock at night. And you got an infant, and it's the time that you put in, right?
Definitely. Oh, wow. I just hear so many entrepreneurial stories, and some of them start out with a everything all at once. It
Right.
feels like. Well, it seems like you're building something really awesome. So I'm excited to dive in, learn more about what your company is doing and how you've built along the way. So now it's 10 years in. What does your team look like today? How many team members do you have? And what's your company culture?
So collectively, we got about 34 people between all of our locations and all of our drivers and staff. It's myself and I have a business partner. We're 50-50 in the business. I'm the president, he's the CEO. So I really focus on the strategy and the finance. We obviously collaborate on every decision. We've got some very good leaders, a VP and a general manager that help us really drive the outcomes of those strategies and those operations. Um, but our culture is very much driven of willingness, right? This is a transportation can be a really tough industry. It can be a grind. It can be brutal. There's a lot of demand on it. So Our culture is one that's work hard, play hard. And I think you have to balance both of those because it gets stressful, and how to have those personalities and the multitude of personalities be able to work together in that environment is can be a challenge, but with that right staff and that right support and leadership, it's a breeze because you know and recognize when people are at max stress and when to lighten that mood. So we have a very lighthearted industry or a very lighthearted company, very caring toward the individuals. My partner and I, when we first started this, we said drivers aren't treated very well out on the road, not only with traffic around them, but also culturally, they're kind of not treated the best. So we try to edify those drivers as much as possible and the folks on our dock as well, and really help them understand the importance of what they're doing, not just for us, but for the customers.
Hmm. That really hits hits my heartstrings personally because my dad was in logistics and trucking for many years, and I've had multiple people in my life who've been in the industry to some degree. And so it means a lot, that you're building something that cares about, the family, the company, the workers, the individuals, and like all the elements, because it's so true. When you have people that are feeling good, they're gonna work good too.
Right. And I think it goes to having a leadership structure that genuinely cares about their people. We try to make it a point to get to know everybody within the company, and it doesn't matter who it is. We want to make sure that uh, we know them, that they know they have access to us. And that's been a challenge as you scale and grow. We've been lucky. The first person we hired, our general manager, he's still with us. And keeping people is a key element to what we do with the nuances that we have within the services that we or the sectors that we service.
Mhm.
But we take time to get to know them because it's important that they know that people actually care. We lend a hand as much as we can to people for their personal needs, and that's sometimes frowned upon. And that's why I'm glad we're under 50 people now because we can still do those things
Right.
without, big trouble. But we enjoy getting to know the people that come in and bust their tail for us because yeah, they need a job, but they also need to like coming to work, regardless if they're on a dock unloading a container, or they need to know that people genuinely care about them as a person.
Oh, I think that's huge. Absolutely love hearing about that. I want to kind of dive into learning about your leadership style and then also a little bit about some of your emerging leaders on your team. So, you talked a bit about how the company is ran and the company culture. How would you describe your leadership style?
My leadership style is very much directionally based. I like people to understand why they're doing something and how it fits into the bigger picture. When I was in the army, the greatest leaders I had were always the ones, here's what we're gonna go do, here's why we're doing it, and here's how it fits into that picture. And that resonated with me because I was more motivated to go out and give more of an effort when I knew the purpose behind it. And I feel you gotta let people know their purpose within an organization, or they just go through motions.
Mm. I think that's huge. Really, that's a really important factor as you're creating your company culture and giving people that sense of purpose for their work. And do you see any emerging leaders on your team right now, whether it be some of the drivers or just anybody on the executive side, anything like that?
Yeah, we've got a couple. So we've had uh just last week we've had some challenges in one of our terminals down in Springfield. And through that, we've had a young lady that has just absolutely stepped up and said, I can do more. I was kind of restricted, but I can do more. Here's what I know, and here's where I think there's opportunities to improve. And we knew that we've known that she was good, but she has really exposed herself to how much bandwidth and how far she can run. And so, we've got people down there right now, and I'm actually in the area as well. But listening to that voice and watching her guide us in how we can improve has just been incredible. Another one that we've had, she's incredibly intelligent and being able to view all aspects of our business because we're pretty diverse in what we do. But she came from a similar sector, not specific to what we do, but
Yeah.
her absorption of, customs and border and the asset side of our business, it's incredible how fast she's adapted it and how many times she comes up and finds gaps with what we're doing. And that type of leadership is significantly important when somebody's got your blind side to be able to look at it and say, you guys are exposed, let's do this. But it's also important to listen to those folks and not just ignore it to think you know everything as well.
That's incredible. And like I think that's like a couple golden nuggets of this conversation for other business owners to hear as well, is when you see that those emerging leaders on your team to like embrace that or listen and hear what they have to say. Because isn't that like the main role too of being an owner or a founder is, surrounding yourself with the people who are smarter. That's a huge like what I like to do in business too. And
Right.
so finding those people who really have the heart and the knowledge is when you get those two together, it's a superpower.
Right, right. And I've always been, the best advice I ever got when I was pinning my an E6 in the military was he told me never forget where you came from. Because we
Mm,
started, you start at the bottom. Yeah, I started unloading trucks when I first got out of the Army. And that always resonates in my mind that no matter how big you get, that don't forget where you came from. Because at that very entry level, there's knowledge there that you can distance yourself from very easily as a leader. And I think it's highly important to have that ear and to be able to welcome that input because if you get where you came from, you're never gonna keep your eyes on the importance of the nuances at the very entry point, the customer facing side of life.
mm, 100%. I think that's huge in business. And, kind of like switching gears slightly, but also in kind of the same, part of the conversation, looking at what you're developing now in the within the company, I would love to learn about your like the clients you work with and your ideal clients or customers. If I were to say, walk in your doors, check out your website, how would I know I would be an ideal client or customer for you?
So a lot of what we do so in Kansas City, we're one of six container freight stations that the international public freight can come to for less than container load. Um, so our customer base is a lot of freight forwarders. So we deal with a lot of international freight forwarders, and we make sure, and it's actually our tail on the line, we make sure that they properly clear their customs documents. And then we have the
Mhm.
transportation side as well to give them visibility to where things are going. When you think about international logistics and how many hands are paid through the life cycle from anywhere overseas into the US to final destination, that visibility and that tracking and that confidence in what those freight forwarders are doing becomes very important. Over the
Mhm.
last few years, we've diversified into domestic transportation as well to help support that, really to fill the trucks and keep them moving. So we've put a lot of time into how we assess our technology, all the way from customs clearance to visibility to final destination and delivery. So those freight forwarders and those domestic shippers, we want their experience to very much to be communicative on the handling of what their product is doing, because that's their lifeline, just
Mm,
like those customers are ours. So we put that technology in place to make sure it's a smooth transaction, very visible, very concise with the billing as well, because that's
mhm.
just as important as doing what you say you're going to do. It's not just getting it to from A to B, but also not exposing them to a miss in their budget for that movement.
Definitely. It sounds like a lot of what you do is hugely based on communication, especially when you're thinking about things going overseas and just even like passing that baton properly.
Absolutely.
That's huge. Looking at, I'd like to kind of like take it back a few years and, the beginning years, you talked about those first 5 years. I like to share challenges that business owners overcome to help inspire our audience who are maybe going through something similar right now with their business. So, can you share something that you faced earlier on in business that you overcame, and how did you do it?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we first get started, with a brand new DOT number, you have to have time and service to build confidence amongst shippers and customers. So it takes years to really build that reputation and that background, just from a DOT number perspective. And that grind is really not giving up. It's uncovering
Mhm.
every stone to find your niche. And that's where we got into this international piece. It was a smaller niche market. Um, but we were very flexible in what we would see in the markets. I mean, we've done everything from, overnight FedEx Smart Post type of work to this international piece that we're in now. But we had to kick over a lot of rocks to find that market that we can serve best, and what risk we were willing to tolerate within that. Releasing something outside of customs into the public is a major risk for us. It's a major factor in what we do every day. And when you're going through 35, 40 containers a month, there's a lot of risk sitting out there. So that challenge was really getting the detail around what market are we going to serve? Where's the opportunity? Because it's not just over the road trucking that we do, which has its own big challenges, but it was a grind to find that and to build that confidence within that shipper base. And even then, you're always at risk of losing that.
Mm.
And you have to grind and have the people that will grind with you to keep that service level high.
Definitely. Again, that's another golden nugget that, like, yeah, you're grinding it out, especially with when you're dealing with a lot of risk and a lot of literal moving parts.
Yeah.
It's gonna keep that all the balls in the air, like juggling all of that. And so I could see that, each year you're finding that finesse and growing over time. Now, as we kind of look at the future, well, how do you see the company growing in the next 3 to 5 years?
So I think in the next 3 to 5 years, as we've done, so the past 3 years, we've tried to diversify and work toward not just international, but the domestic piece as well. And we focus a lot on that LCL and LTL type of market. Over the next 3 to 5 years, our opportunity is really getting into that regional full truckload. There's a possibility of drayage, but that would be more of that 5 year term. But I think adding equipment for regional uh, truckload support is really where we can drive some additional business.
Mm.
Expansion into from a territory perspective, over the last 3 years, we've gone from just Kansas City to Springfield, Wichita, and St. Louis. So we've had some pretty strong expansion. I don't know that that's necessarily our next step, but I think it's going to be more of a regional capacity on the full truckload side.
Definitely. Well, thank you for sharing that. And, as you look at like kind of where you're at right now, going into this next season, what is something you're currently challenged with that you're maybe working through?
Right now, it's industrial volume, right? Our industry is in a pretty tough decline in volume. So it's really around balancing our capacity with the volume demand and being able to scale that. And unfortunately, with scaling that, sometimes you're sitting in a truck that you don't want to sit, right? Those assets sitting, you don't want to have that. But as we've gone through this decline in volume in our industry, we've had to adjust to that pretty quickly, which affects your revenue, obviously. Um, that balance has been tough over the last 8 months.
Definitely. Now, are you like a volume of work or a volume of workers? Like, can you define that more?
Sorry, for us, volume means total tonnage of shipments that come through the door and on the trucks.
Okay.
People just it's just a different buying cycle that we're in right now, and
Hmm.
uh, adjusting to that, right? If it goes from, when inventory levels are high, it's great. The effects of the international community is weighing on everybody, and it's ebbing and flowing so quickly right now that you have to scale that labor with it. And that can create challenges within itself to maintain that same service and visibility that we spoke about earlier.
Definitely. Now, are you seeing a lot of companies or like, are you seeing a lot of the people you're working with like holding back, or do you think it's more on the consumer side, not purchasing, or things aren't shipping as much, or is it a little bit of both?
It's a little bit of both, but then you also have the elevated cost component for imports.
Mm.
And I think that buying cycle of imports coupled with, what's going on internationally is creating part of that challenge. So those cycles change from, if it's full container loads, it's shifting to LCL because they're buying in smaller quantities based on the cost. Um, I think over the next few months, what we'll see is significantly higher buying on the full full container side of it versus the LCL. So that will have a bit of effect on us as well, which is why we're focused on the domestic piece to offset that. Because once it's in, it's got to come back out.
Definitely. That's kind of what I was gonna ask you too, was like, is that kind of like the pivot into more domestic transportation would probably be the a good.
Yeah. So after COVID, we said, okay, this has been great, but as this as we start to see it decline from COVID, we said let's look at what else can we do. How do we
Mhm.
fill trucks? So we went in and started bringing on a different set of sales force for that domestic piece because there are different sales strategies within that. So we brought on some domestic sales, and really has helped us get through that steep decline in some of those markets coming off COVID.
Mm. And have you had any other challenges as you're kind of pivoting towards domestic work? Is there anything that's kind of roadblocks you're hitting, or are you feeling pretty good about it so far?
Feeling pretty good about it. We were able to merge the two service offerings as far as how we manage it, and because most everything would originate off of our dock. So it would come to our dock, we say, hey, we've got trucks and we'd like to manage that for you. And now we've got a different set of, okay, we've got to go pick these things up now, right? We got to go have customer pickups in the market, bring it back in, sort it, and send it right back out. But again, I go back to we had the right people. We outlined the purpose and why we're doing it and how we want to do it and the visibility of it. And it's been pretty smooth, to be honest.
That's good. That's good to hear. It really goes back to like the foundation you talked about in the beginning, like having the crew and people feeling purposeful, and those like foundational things that can get you through the roadblocks and the times that we're currently facing for sure. So I think that's huge. This has been such a great conversation. I could talk to you for hours and probably deep dive into some of the things that you're going into and working on. But now I'd love to dive into a fun part of the conversation called our rapid fire questions.
Uh-huh.
Uh, it's a lot of fun. It's meant to be fun. And so I'll be asking you four questions and you answer very top of mind. So, Dustin, are you ready for some rapid fire?
I'll give it my best.
All right. Question number one is, what is a key to success for you?
Key to success is people. Surrounding yourself with the right people has to be.
Definitely. Number two is, what is a piece of advice you have for other business owners?
Just because things get tough, you don't stop. Whether it's on the banking side or the customer facing side, you lose big customers, not to stop kicking those rocks and turning over stones to find what's next. And it's hard, but you've got to have that strong backbone to keep going.
Definitely. Love that. Number three is what is it could be a book, a podcast, an article, just any piece of content that maybe resonated with you most recently.
I read a lot of leadership books. I enjoy understanding some of those other values of leadership from others, um, and historical documents. I just love reading historical books on um, where things have come from. I think it's important to know. So,
Hmm. Awesome. And the fourth question is, if you could wave a magic wand and overnight improve one aspect of your business, what would it be?
magic wand. I would say for that volume to pick back up so we can get back into really how we like to take care of people.
Mm, definitely. Well, thank you for sharing those. Well, let's help make that happen. How can folks find your business online?
Yeah, so they can go to our website. They can go through and find our firm's code if they need anything coming into the Kansas City, Springfield, or Wichita markets. Um, but I think that website drives a lot of people to us, for sure. And our phone numbers are on there. We've got all the visibility they need on there for imports and their transportation.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Dustin, for our final question today. What is most inspiring to you today?
I think most inspiring is that family life. Like I said, we started this with a baby, and every time I look at him, I said, regardless of how tough it gets, there's a purpose behind it, and let's make sure that I can give those two the best life that I can. And that's a big driver for me.
Oh, I love hearing that. That's inspiring to me to hear that too. It's like when you have those folks in your life that kind of push you to keep you going, create purpose. Those are very inspirational. So thank you so
Mhm.
much for this great conversation today.
I greatly appreciate it. It was nice to meet you, and thank you. Appreciate it.